Good morning. It is 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, April the 20th, 2021. We want to welcome you to the Dallas Independent School District STEM Environmental Education Center virtual field trip. We want to say a special welcome to Junkins, Anderson, Central, and Edna Rowe, all of Dallas ISD. Teachers, if you're watching and you have not signed up, please do so at www.tiny.cc/EEC register. This is just for our attendance records only. Program this morning will be structures and behaviors of organisms. During this virtual field trip, students will compare the structures and functions of different species that help them live and survive in a specific environment. Students will also differentiate between inherited traits of plants and animals and learn behaviors. Ms. Fuller talk to you about the structure and function of terrestrial organisms. Mr. Monroe will discuss structure and function of aquatic organisms. Ms. Nash is going to tell you about inherited traits, and Ms. Ramirez about learned behaviors. This is a virtual field trip, so you cannot verbally answer us questions, but you can go to www.tiny.cc/EEC /question/answer and ask your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them during the program. If not, I'll send the answers to your teachers. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Ms. Fuller is going to tell you all about structures and functions of terrestrial organisms.
Good morning, boys and girls. My name is Mrs. Fuller. Welcome to Lab 502. And this is my lab assistant. Her name is Lauren Chicken. Lauren Chicken is an Americana chicken, and she's covered in feathers because she's a bird. Well, that's the structure. What is the function of the feathers? I'm going to put Lauren down. And I'm going to show you different kinds of feathers and tell you about their function. This is the structure of a flight feather. Flight feathers help birds fly. They're very strong, and they form one piece because all the filaments are hooked together, and they push against the air and helps the bird to fly. Another type of feather, another structure on a bird is a down feather. You can see all the little filaments are separate. They're not all hooked together. By virtue of that, it's able to trap air against the body of the animal and help the animal stay warm. Now, another kind of feather is a contour feather. Can you see how this is curved? It snuggles up against the body of the bird, helps the bird be aerodynamic, helps the bird so it'll slip through the airstream easily, makes the bird very smooth. But this particular one is covered in spots. Do you think those spots may help the bird be camouflaged? I think you're right. And then the final feather I'm going to show you, the final structure, is a peacock feather. Peacocks are male and the peahens are the female. So the peacocks have these huge array of these very beautiful feathers with an eye on it. And, so when he spreads his feathers out, he's trying to attract a mate, but he's also trying to make himself look very large and very intimidating with all these eyes. So it's got a dual, this kind has a dual purpose. So we're going to look at some different kinds of terrestrial animals, land animals, and see what structures on their body help them to function in their ecosystem. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And the title of this program is Structures and Functions of Terrestrial Organisms. What are the structures of organisms and how do they function to help the organism survive in its habitat? The first picture is a picture of a mountain lion or a cougar or a puma. It's got a lot of different names, but it's a mammal, and you'll see it's covered in fur. That fur helps it stay waterproof and also helps it stay warm. We've already talked extensively about feathers, so now we're going to go on to the rodent over there on the right. That's a nutria, and you see his lovely orange teeth. It's not because he went to the University of Texas, but those teeth have iron embedded in them. They're very, very strong and help him cut through wood. Beavers have the same kind of teeth. So what are some essential questions we need to ask ourselves? What structures on mammals help them stay warm? I think you already know the answer to that. What function do reptiles carry out that enable them to move from water to land? So mammals, let's talk about several kinds of structures. Hair, they have hair or fur. They have well-developed brains, strong skeletons, and lungs. So what are the functions of those structures? The hair or the fur helps the mammals stay warm, protects them from sunburn, helps them be camouflaged. There's a lot of different functions for hair or fur. Well-developed brains can aid in survival techniques and also help them achieve homeostasis of body temperature. Strong skeletons allow strong muscles, protects the nervous system, allows movement, and lungs allow mammals to live on land and breathe air. Now, amphibians. Now, the teacher who's going to come after me, Mr. Monroe, is going to talk about aquatic organisms, those that live in the water. Amphibians are interesting because I'm going to talk about the part of their life where they live on land. He'll talk about the part of their life where they live on water. Amphi means double or dual. Bio means life. So they have a dual life, a double life. The first part in the water, aquatic, the second part on land, terrestrial. They have smooth, permeable skin. That means things can go in and out of the skin. And in the adult stage, when they're in land, they have lungs. The function of the skin of amphibians helps them with their gas exchange. As you know, when we breathe out carbon dioxide. When we breathe in oxygen. But they need help with that because they only have a 3-chambered heart and their body is somewhat inefficient in doing that gas exchange with their lungs. So their smooth, permeable skin helps them with that, but they have to stay moist. If they dry out, they're done for. The lungs allow them to live on land as adults. Now, reptiles, everybody's favorite group, right? The 2 structures we're going to look at are scales and teeth. Scales are very, very helpful. They help prevent the animal from dehydrating. They protect the eyes of snakes. Snakes don't have eyelids. So they help protect the eyes of snakes from being scratched or torn. The scaly skin enables the reptiles to lay eggs on land because they're not dependent on a permeable skin to help them breathe. And teeth help the reptile grasp its prey. If you've ever seen a crocodile open its mouth, you know, it's got those real pointy, lots and lots of pointy teeth. And venomous snakes have fangs that are hollow, and when they bite their prey, venom will flow through those hollow fangs into their prey. Now, birds have feathers, beaks or bills, web feet, talons. They've got many, many structures that help them function in their ecosystem. We've already talked about feathers, so I won't go over that again. Beaks and bills are used for a bird's particular diet. Geese and ducks eat weeds and duckweed, things like that. So they have bills so they can let the water flow away. But a hummingbird has a very long, narrow, tiny beak that it can go into a flower, and birds like owls and ospreys and eagles and kestrels, they've got short, curved teeth that are very, very strong. And that helps them because they're birds of prey. They need that kind of help. Web feet help waterfowl swim, and talons help raptors capture their prey. So when we talk about talons, there's a nice set right there owned by an eagle, and those talons can grip the prey. Now I'm going to get out of the slide presentation And I'm going to tell you, if you have any questions about the structures on organisms, on terrestrial organisms, and how they function for the animal, Dr. Gorman will be more than happy to answer your question. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. Question, what is an example of structure and function of terrestrial organisms? Each plant and animal structure has a special purpose. When you think of elephants, you probably envision their long trunks and floppy ears. Both of these structures have a specific function that helps animals survive. An animal's trunk is a special structure that helps gather food. The big floppy ears help elephants hear noises that are far away. And now, Mr. Monroe is going to talk to you about structures and function of aquatic organisms.
Good morning, students. My name is Mr. Monroe, and we're going to be investigating structures of aquatic organisms and how those structures help those organisms survive in the watery environment in which they live. Now, when we talk about aquatic, that is a watery environment, like a pond, a lake, and we have two ponds that are behind the center that we study, and we have a lake that's in the Post Oak Preserve that we do field studies on. But listen, when we talk about those bodies of water, the first thing that comes up as far as life in that body of water are fish. And we have a variety of fish that inhabit our ponds. We're going to start by talking about some of the structures, body structures that fish have and how they function to help that fish go through what we call life processes. I'm going to start out by showing you the skeleton of a fish. And of course, we know that because it has a skeleton, it has a backbone, so it belongs to a group of organisms that we call vertebrates, okay? The first structure that I want to talk about is the part that actually gives the fish the ability to breathe oxygen, and we call those gills. Now, gills are located on each side of the front end of the fish, the head. On each side, there is a slot or a slit, and inside that slit are embedded the gills. Now, those gills, what they are tissues that are like short threads, protein structures called filaments. Now, these filaments have many functions, including transferring ions from the water, as well as going through the gas exchange. In fact, bringing in oxygen and pushing out or exhaling carbon dioxide, much like our bodies go through, but fish use gills to do that. The other thing, or the other structure that I want to talk about that really enables a fish to move around, and that is fins. There are a variety of fins, depending on what species of fish you're talking about. There are twin fins, there's a single fin, and an example of a single fin would be the dorsal fin, which is found at the top. And then we have the tail, and then we have the pectoral fin, okay? Now, the pectoral fin is fins, there's a twin set of fins that are here. And then we have what we call the anal fin that is located here. Those fins are used to maintain position, allow the fish to move, steer, and even come to a stop. I have a real live fish that we're going to observe just for a minute. And let me share something else with you. You know, a lot of times fish, we don't realize that some fish have teeth, especially some of the game fish that we have here in the state of Texas. Bass, crappie, catfish, they all have some sort of teeth. But there are other fish like the carp, the suckerfish, guess what? They don't have teeth. They get their food by a sucking action, pulling the food in, okay? Now, those teeth that are inside those fish can be very, very small. They're located inside the mouth, the mandible, right here at the front. And they're set at an angle. For example, if this fish was alive and tried to eat another fish, when he grabbed the fish with his mandibles, those teeth are at an angle that would actually keep the fish or its prey from getting away. Now, this is the live fish that I'm talking about. And if you guys can see it, you can see the dorsal fin that is at the top. You can see the anal fin, which is at the back. And right here is the pectoral fins, one on each side. And they use those fins, again, to maintain position, move, and steer. And right now, this one's just holding in one position. And you can see, he got excited. You can see that those pectoral fins are just flipping. And they're the ones that kind of help propel the fish forward and back. If you've ever canoed, you know how the paddles in a canoe work. If you're going to pull forward, you're going to give an action like this. If you're going to back up, you're going to push to back up, right? So their fins act primarily the same way, okay? Now, there are other organisms in aquatic systems. You heard Ms. Fuller talk about amphibians. Well, I have an amphibian here, and the first part of this amphibian's life, he was born in water. He was born in water. And he hatched from an egg, and he was like a tadpole. He swam around in that water for a while. He had a tail, which generally it acted like the tail of a fish. It was able to steer. It was able to kind of move him forward. And I've never seen a tadpole really move backwards. Hoppy. This is Hoppy, American Bullfrog. And of course, just like I said, he was born in water. He was a tadpole at first. And then eventually, as he went through the stages in his life cycle, which we call metamorphosis, he grew legs and the tail disappeared, and eventually he became a full-fledged frog. And you heard Ms. Fuller talk about the smooth skin, and that's where a lot of the gas exchanges is happening. Now, if Hoppy's skin was to dry out, it would take away that function of the skin, which would probably allow Hoppy to go through asphyxiation or to suffocate. He would not get enough oxygen to stay alive. Now, I like to talk about the web feet. He's got some enormous web feet. That means what? He's an excellent swimmer. But more importantly, when he's on land, these guys can hop quite a ways. Simply because when he spreads that out, it gives him a good platform to launch off of. And then he's got these very muscular legs. This guy can leap for about a distance of 8 feet. As compared to a toad, which has a big body and little legs, that toad probably can only hop 2 or 3 feet. But this guy, he is a jumper. Now I'm going to put him up. And I want to talk about some of the aquatic turtles we have. We have aquatic turtles that are in our pond. Turtles actually belong to a group that we call reptiles, okay? Now, this is the most common aquatic turtle that we have. This is Red, the red ear slider. And if I was to be able to grab one of his feet and pull it out, he's a little shy guy, you know. He pulls them in so I can't get to him. And you know what? That's another structure, his shell. So what does the shell do for him? What function does it have? You know, long ago, I saw a cartoon when I was real young, when I was a child. On Saturday mornings, I watched cartoons a lot. And I actually saw a cartoon where this turtle actually took off his shell like he was taking off his coat. Can that possibly happen? No, that shell is actually part of his backbone. That doesn't happen. But you know what? It protects him. It keeps all of his internal organs under protection. So that's the major structure function of the shell. Well, you know, I've often had the question asked of me, Mr. Monroe, how can you tell the difference between a land turtle and a water turtle? Well, there is a big difference. You see, if I was to get his little feet out, we see they were webbed. not as big, the feet wouldn't be as large as Hoppy's, but they do have skin in between their toes, which allows him to be able to swim pretty well. Let me get out another turtle. And before I get that turtle out, let's just take a glance at a land turtle. This is a land turtle. This is a three-toed box turtle. Now, this one would be considered a land turtle simply because if she sticks her feet out, come on, Teresa, stick them out. You will see that she does not have webbed feet. She has claws, okay? And so that tells you that this is a land turtle. She's got a shell just like Red, but you know what? Her shell is even a little bit different. She's a terrestrial animal. But if, you know what, she decided to close up, she could close everything up in her shell for protection. That's why they call them a box turtle. But I'm going to put her up and I'm going to get another one out. Now this one, definitely you're going to be able to see some webbed feet. This is Snappy, the snapping turtle. Now Snappy, the snapping turtle definitely has some webbed feet. See those webbed feet? Oh boy, he's a good swimmer. But you know what? Often they are mistaken for other turtles, or other turtles are mistaken for them. You have a lot of people that come out and do field studies in our pond and they'll see a turtle swimming on the surface and they'll say, oh, there goes a snapping turtle. And I'll look at them and I'll think, they don't really know. Snapping turtles spend 90% of their life, guess where? On the bottom of the pond, simply because their metabolic system, they can control the amount of oxygen that they need. And if they do need air, they will find a shallow enough spot because they have a long enough neck, which is a structural part of their body that helps them survive, a long enough neck where they can stick their little noses just above the surface of the water to take in oxygen. And just to show you, do you think snapping turtles have teeth? I don't know. Let's take a look. Maybe. Whoa, does he have teeth? I don't think so. Now see how long that neck is? Wow, did you see that? That's how he gets his food too. That long neck can extend. Now they can live to be 50 years old, weigh as much as 50 pounds. Snappy weighs about, I would say about 8 pounds now. But guess what? When they get real heavy, do you think they can swim fast enough to catch a fish? I don't think so. So he's going to lay on the bottom of the pond and dig in with these claws, which is another structure, hide himself in the mud and the silt. When some unsuspecting fish swim by, guess what? He's got that fish, just like that, okay? Now, I'm going to put Snappy up. And if any of you have any questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Gorman, and maybe he can answer those questions for you. You guys have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. And the question is, define structure and function of aquatic organisms. Of functions. Aquatic ecosystems perform many important environmental functions. For example, they recycle nutrients, purify water, attenuate floods, recharge groundwater, and provide habitats for wildlife. An example is organisms that are called shredders, such as the caddisfly and the stonefly. Their function is to break down leaves and debris in streams and ponds. Their structure is their biting and chewing mouth parts. Now we're going to let Ms. Nash tell us about inherited traits.
Hello, welcome to my classroom. So we've been talking and seeing a lot of great animals. So I'm going to talk about plants and talk about some of their traits, their structure, and the function of those structures. Because plants, of course, don't really learn things. So everything we see when we're looking at a plant is inherited from its parent plant. So this little cactus grew from a seed, but the seed came from a plant that looked just like this. So let's look at a few pictures and then we'll talk about some things that you can find around in the gardens and parks right around. So let me see. And there we go. So cactus are a really great example of interesting and very important structure that they have for protection, because of course plants can't run away. So they have to figure out some way to keep from being just devoured by the animals who might be hungry. So particularly in a desert environment where not many plants can survive, the cactus is able to survive. And as a result would be a handy meal for many animals. And as a result, they are mostly covered in thorns. So really amazing. Look at these on this, the trunk of this. Isn't that amazing? Okay. So all kinds of really interesting thorns, spines to protect them. Now, cactus are unique to the New World, to North and South and Central America. But in other parts of the world, particularly in dry habitats, you might find a lot of thorns on plants. Because again, animals are hungry and thirsty because plants will have water in their tissue. So this one's called camel thorn, great giant thorns. And camels, like the giraffe here, which is also eating a camel's thorn, have these long tongues that can go in between the thorns and eat the leaves. So even those great giant thorns do not really completely protect the tree. So we have some amazing thorns around, just right around us, particularly on that honey locust tree. And you might see these in the parks. Okay. They're not a very big tree, okay, but they have beautiful yellow flowers, and then they have these amazing thorns, thorn on thorn. And in the fall, these big seed pods. And scientists think that 20,000 years ago in the Pleistocene, there were camels living in North America that were probably eating, just like the camel in the picture we saw before, eating the leaves and the beans, the bean pods of this plant. Of course, the camels are gone, but the thorns are still here. And most of our animals can't really eat these yummy seed pods, but the deer will eat them after they fall off in the winter. And one of the things I find so interesting is the connections between plants and animals. And one of the most amazing connections are these kind of hummingbirds here. So the hummingbird is looking for nectar, and the flower wants to be pollinated. So this hummingbird has this amazing recurved beak that matches precisely this flower. The nectar's down here. And when the hummingbird sticks that beak down in to get the nectar, the pollen right here gets deposited on the bird's head and goes to another flower to pollinate. And we have a bird right around in our area that's always out there at the church cat, because they are the obligate or only pollinator for this plant. Okay? Because they can stick their beak down in to get the nectar. And in the meantime, the pollen is getting stuck on their head. So at night, those white flowers attract the bats. Okay, so that color and opening at night attract the bats to pollinate. Here's a long-nosed fly, again, special structure to pollinate that plant. And these are all inherited. And of course, famously, the ghost orchid. And here it is. It's this long, amazingly long nectary. Okay, the nectar is down in here. What animal's going to have a tongue or a beak or a proboscis long enough to get down in there? Well, famously, someone sent a sample of this flower to Charles Darwin, and he said, famously, somewhere out there, there's a moth with a long proboscis. And and sure enough, there it is. They found it later. Look at that. Amazing. Almost a foot long. Okay. And here it is coming to the orchid at night. Okay. It looks a lot like our own little hawk moth that we have that people mistake for a hummingbird. And here's another really interesting example of structure and function. This flower smells like human sweat, and it's attracting mosquitoes to be pollinated. This flower smells like dead animals and it's attracting flies to be its pollinator. So lots of really interesting examples of those that structure and function in the plant world. And you can go outside any day. I went out yesterday and I picked a lot of good examples. Take your hand lens with you and you can look at some really interesting details. So you might find a honey locust tree. Check out those thorns. I mean, that's an impressive thorn. Okay, they're all around. Okay, this one, that one, all these plants. And you might find a cedar tree. Now, again, because they can't run away, they have these structures, these prickly things to discourage them. And they also have, being the great chemists of the planet, they have the smell. Okay? So they produce oil and then they don't taste very good. Okay? Hardly anyone will eat a cedar tree because it doesn't taste good. Many plants will have sap, again, even toxic sap. So this little one has thorns, but it's a succulent. It's not a cactus because it has leaves. But if I pull a leaf off, see that white sap? It's sticky and it may be slightly toxic. Okay? So again, this is a structure that has a function of discouraging animals from eating it. Grasses. If you take a grass and you feel it like that, the edge, and you look at it with your hand lens, it's like a tiny knife, okay, to keep animals from eating it. It's yucca. Has a pointy tip and then very rough edges, and the leaf itself is really rough. So lots of interesting things to go out there and observe and think about how plants have different kinds of structures to keep animals from eating them. So if you have any questions, Dr. Gorman will be glad to answer.
Nash. And give a definition of inherited trait. An inherited trait is one that is genetically determined. Inherited traits are passed from parent to offspring according to the rules of genetics. Most traits are not strictly determined by genes, but rather are influenced by both genes and the environment. And now we're going to have Mr. Maris talk to us about learned behaviors.
Hello, my name is Ms. Ramirez, and in this segment, we're going to be learning about learned behaviors of animals. So before we start our PowerPoint presentation, I have two animal friends that I'm going to show you guys. My first animal friend is this breed is originally from Asia. She has a blue patch of skin covering her ears. She is an omnivore and she is covered in feathers. So be thinking about what animal do you think this is? And I'm going to go ahead and bring her out. You've probably met her before if you've tuned in. So this is Pepper. She is a blue silky chicken, and they get that name because they have a blue patch of skin covering their ears. And of course, if you were to pet her, she is super soft like silk. So think about what are some examples of chicken behaviors, and which of those behaviors are instincts or natural that she just knows how to do, and then what behaviors might be learned. Now Pepper here has learned her name. So when I call her name, she normally comes running to me. I think because she associates her name with getting food or treats. So that is something that she has learned how to do. So I'm going to go ahead and put Pepper up, and then we'll go ahead and meet our next animal. Actually, let me put her on the floor because she's ready to go. My next animal is a mammal. So she is covered in fur. She has big ears, big feet for running and jumping. She's an herbivore, and she also happens to be a prey animal. So make your guesses on what you think this one is, and I'll pull her out. So this is Mochi, and she is a rabbit. She's my pet rabbit. Now think about what are some rabbit behaviors that are instinctual that she just knows how to do. And then also think about what are some things we can teach a rabbit to do. So I will tell you guys that she is potty trained. So she has learned where to go potty. So she doesn't make quite a big mess anymore. And then also something that's been really helpful that she has learned how to do. She kind of knows when it's the end of the day. She knows the routine that when it's the end of the work day, she has to go in her cage for the night. So what's really helped me out is she has kind of like an internal clock. She knows when it's the end of the work day, and I will just turn away from my desk and she'll already be in her cage ready to go for the night. So that's been really helpful. So I really don't have to chase her around the classroom anymore. So that is Mochi the rabbit. Again, be thinking about what are some instinctual behaviors that rabbits just automatically know how to do. So I'm going to go ahead and put Mochi down. And then we're going to go ahead and start our presentation. And I have 2 essential questions for y'all. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to answer these 2 questions. The first question is, what is a behavior? And the second question is, what are 2 examples of learned behaviors? So keep those questions in mind. Hopefully you'll be able to answer them by the end of the presentation. And you can feel free to take a moment to look at these little video snapshots and think about which of these behaviors are learned, and then which of these behaviors might be innate or instinctual. So lots of cute little videos there for you guys to think about those various animal behaviors and what categories they fall under. So a behavior is simply anything that an organism does that involves an action in a response to stimulus. So essentially, in short, a behavior is just an action. And we can categorize those behaviors into 2 groups. Of course, the first group would be innate behaviors, also called the instincts. So those are behaviors that animals just know how to do. It's genetically programmed into them. They don't have to be taught these behaviors. They just know how to do it. And then the other category would be learned behaviors. These are things that an animal has to be taught. They either have to practice this behavior, or they have to watch another animal or a mother do this behavior. So they are things that have to be learned. So go ahead and quickly discuss what are some examples of each of these different types of behaviors that y'all can think of. And I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it with some examples of my own. So we know that things that animals do that seem to come naturally are instinctual behaviors or innate behaviors. So again, the animal does not have to be taught how to do these things. Examples would be things like migration and hibernation. Other examples would be social behaviors. So for example, in this little video, we have bees engaging in a waggle dance, and that is how they communicate with each other. They were not taught this behavior. It's just something they know how to do as soon as they're born. Other examples of instinctual behaviors would be things like bees gathering nectar or nest building in birds. So those are just things that they know they have to do. And then on the flip side, we have those learned behaviors. Again, learned behaviors have to be taught. So not all behaviors are innate. Some of them have to be learned and taught. Examples would be better hunting techniques. So you saw in the previous slide where the mom polar bear was trying to teach her young cub how to hunt effectively. Other examples would be things like birds building a better nest or bees learning better locations for flowers. Now notice there can be some similarities between these 2 behaviors. So sometimes innate behaviors can be modified by learned behaviors. So sometimes they can be related and connected to each other. So let's take a good example with our birds and nest building. So nest building is an innate behavior for birds. They just know they have to do that in preparation for laying eggs. However, birds can learn to build a better nest over time. And so that's a good way to demonstrate how those 2 behaviors can be related and intertwined sometimes. And then here's a couple of examples of some learned behaviors for people. So learning how to ride a bike or learning how to hula hoop. Even with dogs, I like watching a lot of the dog agility contest. So the dog has to learn, it has to be taught how to go through those obstacle courses. And you can see here that dog, he got a really bad score because he ended up missing that last pole and ran into it. But again, the dog has to learn how to go through that course by the owner coaching him and teaching him where to go and what to do. And then in our next little slide, these are some animals at the EEC and at my house. So think about what examples of innate behaviors and what examples of learned behaviors can you think of for each of these animals in the video. So the first video is Jabez, our goat, and he is headbutting, and that is a behavior that is instinctual in goats. He's our only goat, so he obviously didn't learn it from another goat. It's just instinctual behavior to engage in headbutting. Something he has learned, he knows where the food closet is now. So he knows that if we go into the food closet, he knows he is getting food, or if he wants food, he knows where that feed closet is as well. And this is Mochi, the rabbit you guys met earlier. Again, she is potty trained. She has learned where to go potty in that litter box. And again, good news, she also knows, again, around what time it is when it's time for me to go home, and she'll already be in her cage ready for the routine to happen every day. So she's gotten used to the routine as well. And again, she is potty trained. She has several litter boxes in the room, so she doesn't have any more accidents. That is a stray cat. That cat was afraid of people. Every time I would go out the door, she would run away. However, she has learned to associate people now with food. So she now meows really loud, she knows that if she meows, she's gonna get attention and she's probably gonna get food. And some instinctual behaviors of cats, they are excellent hunters, and of course, marking to mark their territory. But again, she now knows that if she meows, she's gonna get food. Lie down. These are my dogs. Lie down. They have learned commands, so they know how to lie down, sit, and shake. That one is Toby. And I know their eyes kind of look creepy in the video. That's just the light from the camera. But the brown dog is Abby. She also knows commands. She's a little more stubborn than the other dog, but they know quite a few commands as well. So those are things that they learned because I taught them those commands. Some instinctual things for dogs. They are excellent hunters, and I did not teach them to do that, but boy, am I upset when I come home and I see a dead animal on my couch. So they have brought squirrels and birds into the house. Again, that's just an instinctual thing for them. Toby has a high prey drive, unfortunately. And then a reflection question for you guys. Think about your own life and give examples of 3 learned behaviors for you or humans in general. So I have a couple of cute little videos here of animals that have learned to use tools for their advantage. And we commonly think of chimps using tools to help them get to food. We have an elephant using its trunk to grab that stick to help it gather the hay that it can't reach. We have a cute little dog on a skateboard, and then we have a badger that has learned to use that gardening tool to help him escape out of his little pen. So again, think back on your life and some learned behaviors for you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop our screen share. We're going to give it back to Dr. Gorman to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. That was very interesting. I really liked the part about Jabez and his headbutting. Okay, describe the learned behavior. In general, a learned behavior is one that an organism develops as a result of experience. Learned behaviors contrast with innate behaviors, which are genetically hardwired, can be performed without any prior experience or training. Right now, I am going to share my screen. During this virtual field trip, students compared structures and functions of different species that help them live and survive in a specific environment. Students also differentiated between inherited traits of plants and animals and learned behaviors. Ms. Fuller talked to you about structure and function of terrestrial organisms. Mr. Monroe explained structure and function of aquatic organisms. Ms. Nash talked about inherited traits, and Ms. Ramirez covered learned behaviors. Thank you, teachers. How did we do? Please go to www.tiny.cc/EEC feedback. Fill out a short form and send it back to us. We would appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day. More importantly, have a great life.